Sarah Martinez never imagined she would become one of the most talked-about snipers in military history. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she was just another kid who loved hunting with her grandfather. Every weekend they would head out to the ranch, where she learned to shoot rabbits and deer with an old rifle that had been in the family for generations. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran named Joe, noticed something special about Sarah from the very beginning. While other kids her age struggled to hit targets at 50 yards, Sarah could nail a tin can at 200 yards without breaking a sweat. She had a natural steadiness in her hands and an eye that could spot the smallest movements in the distance. "That girl's got a gift," Joe would tell his friends at the local diner. "I've seen plenty of shooters in my time, but none like her." Sarah's parents weren't too thrilled about her spending so much time with guns. Her mother worried that it wasn't appropriate for a young lady, while her father thought she should focus more on her studies. But Sarah couldn't help herself. Every free moment she had, she was out practicing, learning everything she could about ballistics, wind patterns, and breathing techniques. In high school, Sarah joined the rifle team and quickly became their star shooter. She won competition after competition, breaking records that had stood for decades. College scouts started showing up to her matches, offering her scholarships to come shoot for their universities. But Sarah had different plans. The day she turned 18, Sarah walked into the military recruitment office in downtown Houston. The recruiter, a burly sergeant named Williams, looked up from his paperwork and smiled. He had seen plenty of young people walk through those doors, but something about Sarah caught his attention immediately. "What can I do for you today, miss?" he asked. "I want to be a sniper," Sarah said without hesitation. Sergeant Williams almost choked on his coffee. In all his years of recruiting, no young woman had ever walked in and made such a direct statement. Most people who wanted to join the military talked about serving their country or getting benefits for college. But Sarah knew exactly what she wanted to do. "Well, that's certainly direct," Williams said, setting down his mug. "Tell me, what makes you think you have what it takes to be a military sniper?" Sarah reached into her backpack and pulled out a folder filled with shooting competition certificates, newspaper clippings, and photographs of her with various trophies. She spread them out on the sergeant's desk like she was playing cards. Williams flipped through the documents, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. State championships, national competitions, records broken. This girl wasn't just good, she was exceptional. "These are impressive," he admitted. "But military sniping is very different from competition shooting. It's not just about hitting targets. It's about staying calm under pressure, making life or death decisions, and dealing with situations most people can't even imagine." "I understand that, sir," Sarah replied. "My grandfather fought in Vietnam. He's told me stories about what it's really like over there. I know it's not a game." Over the next 2 hours, Williams walked Sarah through the entire military process. He explained boot camp, advanced training, and the rigorous selection process for special operations. He told her about the physical demands, the mental challenges, and the sacrifices she would have to make. But Sarah never wavered. With each obstacle Williams described, she seemed more determined. By the end of their conversation, Williams was convinced that this young woman had something special. "I'm going to be honest with you," Williams said as they wrapped up their meeting. "The chances of making it through sniper school are slim, even for the best shooters. And the chances of a woman making it through are even slimmer. Not because women can't do it, but because the military is still catching up with the times." "I'll take those odds," Sarah said, signing her enlistment papers without another moment's hesitation. 6 months later, Sarah found herself at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, getting screamed at by drill instructors who seemed to take particular pleasure in making her life miserable. Boot camp was everything Williams had warned her about and more. The physical training was brutal, the mental pressure was constant, and the other recruits weren't always welcoming to having a woman in their ranks. But Sarah pushed through every challenge. When other recruits were dropping out or getting recycled to start over, Sarah kept moving forward. She excelled in marksmanship training, scored high on all her physical fitness tests, and earned the respect of her instructors through sheer determination and skill. The day she graduated from boot camp, Sarah's grandfather Joe was in the front row, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. He had never been more proud of anyone in his entire life. "You did it, kiddo," he whispered as they hugged after the ceremony. "You're really going to be a Marine." But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Boot camp had been tough, but it was nothing compared to what lay ahead. Advanced infantry training would push her even harder, and after that, if she was lucky enough to be selected, would come the real test, sniper school. That night, as Sarah lay in her bunk at the Marine base, she thought about the long road ahead. She knew there would be people who doubted her, who thought a woman couldn't handle the pressure of being a military sniper. She knew there would be times when she would doubt herself, but she also knew that she had something inside her that couldn't be taught or trained, a natural ability that had been growing stronger since those first days, hunting with her grandfather. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head on. Little did Sarah know that in just a few years, she would find herself in a situation that would test every skill she had learned, every lesson her grandfather had taught her, and every ounce of determination she possessed. A situation where a single shot would change the course of a battle and earn her a place in military legend. The journey from small-town Texas girl to elite military sniper was about to begin in earnest, and Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever came next. Marine Sniper School at Quantico was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The first day she looked around at her fellow students and realized she was the only woman in a class of 32 Marines. The other students ranged from battle-hardened veterans to fresh-faced Marines like herself, but they all shared one thing in common. They could all shoot extremely well. The head instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Thompson, was a legend in the sniper community. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had confirmed kills that numbered well into the dozens. When he spoke, everyone listened. "Look around you," Thompson said on that first morning. 32 of you started today. If we're lucky, maybe 12 will graduate. The rest of you will wash out because you can't handle the pressure, you can't make the shots when it counts, or you simply don't have what it takes to be a Marine sniper. His eyes found Sarah in the crowd. Some of you might think this is still about target shooting. Let me be clear. This is about killing enemy combatants who are trying to kill your fellow Marines. If you can't handle that reality, leave now. Nobody moved. The next 8 weeks were the most challenging of Sarah's life. Each day began at 04:30 with physical training that pushed every student to their limits. After that came classroom instruction in ballistics, weather patterns, camouflage, and fieldcraft. Then came the practical exercises, stalking, concealment, and shooting at increasingly difficult targets under increasingly stressful conditions. Sarah excelled in all areas, but it was her shooting that really set her apart. While other students struggled with shots beyond 800 meters, Sarah was consistently hitting targets at 200 meters and beyond. Her natural ability, combined with years of hunting experience and the technical training she was receiving, made her a deadly accurate shooter. But being the best shooter didn't automatically make her popular with her fellow students. Some of the men resented having a woman in the class, especially one who was outperforming most of them. During field exercises, she often found herself excluded from informal strategy sessions or given the cold shoulder during mealtimes. The breaking point came during week 5. The students were conducting a stalking exercise where they had to move undetected across 1,000 meters of open terrain to reach a shooting position. Sarah had successfully completed her stalk and was setting up for her shot when she overheard 2 of her classmates talking. "I don't care how well she can shoot," one of them whispered. "When the bullets start flying for real, she's going to crack. Women always do." "Yeah," the other replied. "It's just a matter of time before she washes out. They probably only let her in here for publicity anyway." Sarah felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. She had a target to hit at 900 meters and the wind was picking up. She settled into her shooting position, controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, dead center in the target's chest area. Gunnery Sergeant Thompson was watching through his spotting scope. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," he called over the radio. "That's how it's done." The 2 Marines who had been talking fell silent. As the weeks progressed, Sarah's reputation grew. She wasn't just good, she was exceptional. Her instructors began using her as an example for other students, having her demonstrate proper shooting positions and breathing techniques. She scored perfect marks on her written exams and consistently outperformed her peers in practical exercises. During the final week of training, the students faced their ultimate test, a comprehensive field exercise that would simulate actual combat conditions. They were divided into pairs and given a mission to locate and eliminate high-value targets while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Sarah was paired with a Marine named Rodriguez, a veteran of 2 deployments who had initially been skeptical of her abilities. But over the course of their training, he had become one of her strongest supporters. "Listen, Martinez," Rodriguez said as they prepared for the exercise. "I'll be honest. When I first saw you in this class, I didn't think you belonged here, but you've proven me wrong every single day. You're one of the best shooters I've ever seen, and I'm proud to be your partner." The exercise lasted 3 days and covered over 50 square miles of Virginia wilderness. Sarah and Rodriguez had to locate 3 different targets, each more challenging than the last. The first target was at 600 meters, a relatively easy shot that Sarah made without difficulty. The second target tested their fieldcraft more than their marksmanship. They had to stalk to within 400 meters of an observation post, manned by instructors acting as enemy forces. If they were spotted, they would fail the exercise immediately. Sarah and Rodriguez spent 6 hours moving slowly through thick brush and rocky terrain. They crawled on their bellies for the final 200 meters, inching forward one careful movement at a time. When they finally reached their shooting position, Sarah had leaves in her hair, mud on her face, and cuts on her arms from thorns and rocks. But she was perfectly positioned for the shot. "Target acquired," she whispered into her radio. "Send it," came the reply from Gunnery Sergeant Thompson. The shot was another perfect hit. The third and final target was the most challenging yet. A 1,000-meter shot in variable wind conditions, with moving targets that appeared for only a few seconds at a time. Many previous classes had failed. This final test, and even excellent shooters sometimes came up short. Sarah and Rodriguez took their time setting up the shot. They studied the wind patterns, calculated the bullet drop, and waited for the perfect moment. When the target finally appeared, Sarah had less than 10 seconds to make the shot. She controlled. Her breathing found her natural point of aim and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The bullet flew true, striking the target dead center. "Outstanding," Thompson's voice crackled over the radio. "That's a confirmed kill at 1,000 meters. Exercise complete." When the final scores were tallied, Sarah had graduated first in her class, the first woman ever to achieve that distinction at Marine Sniper School. During the graduation ceremony, Gunnery Sergeant Thompson presented her with the title of Marine Scout Sniper and a pin that she would wear with pride for the rest of her career. "Marine Martinez," Thompson said as he pinned the insignia to her uniform. "You are one of the finest shooters I have ever had the privilege to train. Your fellow Marines are lucky to have you watching over them." Sarah's grandfather Joe was there for the ceremony, just as he had been for boot camp graduation. As they hugged afterward, he whispered in her ear, "Your grandmother would have been so proud of you today. She always said you were destined for something special." But even as Sarah celebrated her achievement, she knew that her real test was yet to come. Sniper school had prepared her technically and mentally for combat, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the reality of war. Soon enough, she would find out if all her training would hold up when lives were on the line and bullets were flying in both directions. The next phase of her journey would take her to the most dangerous places on Earth, where her skills would be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. 6 months after graduating from sniper school, Sarah found herself on a transport plane heading toward Forward Operating Base Chapman in Afghanistan. The year was 2018, and despite official talk about winding down operations, American forces were still deeply engaged in combat missions throughout the country. As the C-130 transport plane descended through the night sky, Sarah looked out the small window at the landscape below. Even in the darkness, she could see the rugged mountains and desert terrain that would become her home for the next 12 months. This wasn't like the Virginia countryside where she had trained. This was a place where people had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Her unit, the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, was tasked with supporting special operations missions throughout the region. As the unit's designated marksman, Sarah would provide overwatch and precision fire support for ground operations. It sounded straightforward in briefings, but she knew the reality would be much more complex. The base itself was a sprawling collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings and military vehicles surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Sarah was assigned to a small team of Marines led by Staff Sergeant Williams, a veteran of 4 previous deployments who had a reputation for bringing his people home safely. "Welcome to paradise," Martinez, Williams said as he showed her around the base on her first day. "The locals aren't exactly friendly. The weather's either too hot or too cold, and everything that isn't nailed down will try to kill you. Other than that, it's a great place for a vacation." Sarah's first few weeks were spent on routine patrols and security missions around the base perimeter. She quickly learned that combat in Afghanistan was unlike anything she had studied in training. The enemy didn't wear uniforms, they didn't fight according to conventional tactics, and they knew the terrain far better than any American forces. Her first real engagement came during a patrol in the mountains east of the base. Sarah was providing overwatch from a ridgeline, while the rest of her squad cleared a village suspected of harboring enemy fighters. She had been scanning the surrounding hills through her scope for over an hour when she spotted movement about 800 meters away. Through her scope, she could see 2 men setting up what appeared to be a mortar position. They were clearly preparing to attack her fellow Marines in the village below. "Control, this is Martinez," she whispered into her radio. "I have eyes on 2 enemy fighters setting up indirect fire. Request permission to engage. Stand by, Martinez," came the reply from Staff Sergeant Williams. Sarah kept her crosshairs centered on the closer of the 2 targets while waiting for clearance. Her heart was pounding, but her hands remained steady. This was what all her training had led up to, a real enemy who posed a real threat to American lives. "Martinez, you are cleared to engage," Williams finally said over the radio. Sarah controlled her breathing, made final adjustments for wind and distance, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, dropping the first target instantly. The second man started to run, but Sarah's follow-up shot caught him before he could reach cover. "2 targets down," she reported calmly, though inside she was shaking. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Williams replied. "You probably just saved a lot of lives down here." That night back at the base, Sarah called her grandfather on the satellite phone. She couldn't tell him details about the mission due to operational security, but she needed to hear his voice. "How are you holding up out there, kiddo?" Joe asked. "It's different than I expected, Grandpa," Sarah admitted. "The training prepares you for a lot, but not for everything." "That's normal," Joe said quietly. "When I was in Vietnam, I felt the same way after my first firefight. The important thing is that you did your job and you brought your people home safe. That's what matters." Over the following months, Sarah participated in dozens of missions. She provided overwatch for special operations raids, eliminated enemy snipers who were targeting American positions, and supported ground troops during extended firefights. Her reputation as an exceptional marksman spread throughout the base, and other units began requesting her specifically for high-risk missions. It was during one of these special requests that Sarah first encountered the Navy, SEALs who would later play such an important role in her story. SEAL Team 6 was conducting a raid on a high-value target compound, and they needed a sniper who could provide precision fire support from long range. The team leader was Commander Jack Morrison, a veteran of over 100 combat missions, who had earned a reputation as one of the most effective special operations officers in the military. When he met Sarah for the first time, his reaction was typical of many combat veterans. "You're Martinez?" Morrison asked, clearly surprised. "I was expecting someone different." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I'm your sniper for this mission." Morrison looked her up and down, taking in her small frame and youthful appearance. "No offense, Marine, but this isn't a training exercise. These guys we're going after are hardcore fighters who won't hesitate to kill any American they see. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Sarah had heard variations of this question dozens of times since joining the military. Rather than getting defensive, she simply nodded toward her rifle. "Why don't you ask the 37 enemy fighters I've eliminated over the past 6 months, sir?" Morrison raised his eyebrows. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call to verify Sarah's record. When he hung up, his attitude had completely changed. 37 confirmed kills, he said with new respect in his voice. "That's more than some of my SEALs have after 3 deployments. I apologize for doubting you, Marine. The mission was a complete success." Sarah's precision fire allowed the SEAL team to approach the target compound undetected and capture their high-value target without casualties. Her performance impressed Morrison and his team so much that they requested her for several more operations. But it was during one of these joint missions that Sarah would face her greatest challenge yet. Intelligence had identified a meeting of senior enemy commanders at a remote compound in the mountains. The SEALs would conduct the raid, but they needed sniper support to neutralize any threats that might escape or call for reinforcements. What none of them knew was that this mission would present Sarah with a shot that would test every skill she had learned and push her abilities to their absolute limit. A shot that would make military history and earn her a place in the legends told by special operations forces around the world. As Sarah prepared her equipment for what would become the most famous mission of her career, she had no idea that within 48 hours, she would be facing a challenge that even Commander Morrison believed was impossible. The mission briefing took place at 600 hours in the secure communications room at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Commander Morrison stood at the front of the room with a large map of the target area displayed on the wall behind him. The intelligence was solid. 3 high-ranking enemy commanders were meeting at a compound deep in the mountains, planning coordinated attacks against American and coalition forces. Sarah sat with the rest of the strike team, studying the aerial photographs and topographical maps that showed every detail of the target area. The compound was built into the side of a mountain, with only one access road and clear fields of fire in all directions. It would be a difficult approach for the SEAL team, which made sniper support even more critical. The primary target is Colonel Hassan Mahmoud, Morrison explained, pointing to a photograph on the wall. He's been coordinating attacks throughout this region for the past 2 years. Intelligence indicates he'll be meeting with 2 other senior commanders, General Aziz Rashid and General Omar Farouk. Sarah studied the photos of the 3 men. These weren't random fighters hiding in caves. These were professional military officers who had been responsible for hundreds of American casualties. Eliminating them would significantly disrupt enemy operations throughout the entire region. The challenge is the location, Morrison continued. The compound is positioned so that anyone approaching has to cross nearly a mile of open ground. They chose this spot specifically because they thought it was impossible for us to get close enough for a successful assault. He turned to Sarah. That's where you come in, Martinez. We need overwatch from the ridgeline here. He pointed to a spot on the map, approximately 1,800 meters from the target compound. Your job is to eliminate any sentries or guards that might compromise our approach, and to provide backup if things go sideways during the assault. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 1,800 meters was an extremely long shot even under ideal conditions. With mountain winds, altitude, and the pressure of a live combat situation, it would push her skills to their absolute limit. Sir, she said carefully, 800 meters is a very challenging distance. I can make shots at that range, but the margin for error is extremely small. Morrison nodded. I understand, Marine, but you're the best marksman we have available, and this is a high-priority target. Intelligence says this meeting won't happen again. If we don't get these guys now, they disappear back into the mountains and we may never get another chance. The team spent the rest of the day planning every detail of the mission. Sarah studied wind patterns, calculated bullet trajectories, and tested her equipment multiple times. Her rifle was a .338 Lapua Magnum, one of the most accurate long-range weapons in the military arsenal. But even the best equipment had limitations. They departed the base at 2,000 hours, using helicopters to get within 10 kilometers of the target area. From there, they would have to move on foot through difficult mountain terrain in complete darkness. Sarah carried her rifle, ammunition, and enough supplies for a 3-day mission, just in case extraction was delayed. The hike to the overwatch position took 4 hours. Sarah and her spotter, Corporal Johnson, had to climb nearly 2,000 feet in elevation while carrying their heavy equipment. When they finally reached the ridgeline, both Marines were exhausted, but they immediately began setting up their position. Through her night vision scope, Sarah could see the target compound in the valley below. Lights were on in several buildings, and she could make out guards patrolling the perimeter. The distance measurement confirmed what the maps had indicated. It was exactly 1,247 meters from her position to the main building where the meeting would take place. This is Martinez. In position, she reported over the radio. Copy that, Martinez, Morrison replied. SEAL team is beginning approach. ETA to target is 2 hours. Sarah settled in to wait. Long-range sniping required incredible patience, and she had learned to use waiting time productively. She studied the wind patterns, observing how flags and vegetation moved in the compound below. She made notes about temperature changes as the night progressed. Most importantly, she mentally rehearsed every possible shot scenario. At 0430 hours, Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Martinez, we have a problem. Intelligence update shows the meeting has been moved up. All 3 targets are currently in the compound, but they're planning to leave at first light. We need to move now while it's still dark." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. A pre-dawn assault meant they would be operating in the most challenging light conditions possible. Too dark for natural vision, but too light for night vision equipment to work effectively. "Roger that, sir," she replied. "Standing by for target identification." 20 minutes later, Sarah watched through her scope as the SEAL team began their approach across the open ground. They moved like shadows, using every piece of available cover to mask their advance. But when they were still 400 meters from the compound, everything went wrong. A guard dog started barking, immediately alerting the sentries. Floodlights snapped on around the compound, and Sarah could see armed men taking positions along the walls and rooftops. The element of surprise was completely gone. "Contact." Morrison's voice was urgent over the radio. "We're taking fire from multiple positions. Martinez, we need immediate support." Sarah could see muzzle flashes erupting from at least 6 different positions around the compound. The SEAL team was pinned down in the open with minimal cover. If she didn't act quickly, they would all be killed or captured, but the shot was nearly impossible. At 1,800 meters, she was already at the extreme edge of her rifle's effective range. The pre-dawn light made target identification extremely difficult. Worst of all, the wind had picked up significantly, creating unpredictable air currents that would affect bullet trajectory. Through her scope, Sarah could see 3 figures on the roof of the main building. Based on their positioning and the way other fighters were deferring to them, she was certain these were the 3 enemy generals. They were directing the defense of the compound, coordinating the fire that was keeping the SEAL team pinned down. Commander Morrison's voice came over the radio again, and this time there was desperation in his tone. "Martinez, I need you to take out those leaders on the roof. They're coordinating the entire defense." Sarah adjusted her scope and studied the 3 targets. They were standing close together, gesturing and shouting orders to their men. The range was 1,847 meters. The wind was gusting unpredictably. The light conditions were terrible. "Sir," she said into her radio, "the range is extreme and conditions are not ideal. I'm not confident I can make that shot." There was a pause. Then Morrison's voice came back with words that would later become legendary among Special Operations Forces. "No way anyone lands that shot at this distance in these conditions. But if anyone can do it, it's you, Martinez. My men are counting on you." Sarah took a deep breath and settled into her shooting position. She had trained for moments like this her entire life. Every hour spent practicing with her grandfather, every competition she had won, every lesson learned in sniper school. It all came down to this moment. She would have one chance to save the SEAL team and eliminate 3 of the most dangerous enemy commanders in the region. The next few seconds would determine whether she would become a legend or watch helplessly as good men died because she couldn't make an impossible shot. Sarah's world narrowed to the small circle of her rifle scope. Everything else, the sound of gunfire echoing through the valley, the urgent voices on the radio, the knowledge that American lives hung in the balance, faded into background noise. This was the zone her grandfather had taught her about, the place where great shooters went when everything depended on a single shot. Through the scope, she could see the 3 enemy generals clearly now. General Aziz Rashid was pointing toward the SEAL team's position while shouting orders. General Omar Farouk was speaking rapidly into a radio, probably calling for reinforcements. Colonel Hassan Mahmoud was scanning the surrounding hills with binoculars, likely trying to spot exactly where the Americans were positioned. The distance was 1,147 meters. Sarah had made shots at this range before, but never under these conditions. The wind was gusting unpredictably between 8 and 15 miles per hour, changing direction every few seconds. The pre-dawn light created shadows that made depth perception difficult. Worst of all, her targets were moving constantly as they coordinated the compound's defense. Corporal Johnson, her spotter, whispered urgently beside her. "Wind's coming from the northeast at about 12 miles per hour, but it's shifting. Humidity is high from the morning dew. You'll need to adjust for the altitude. We're about 1,200 feet higher than the target." Sarah made the calculations in her head while watching the wind indicators around the compound. A small flag near the main building was fluttering erratically. Dust clouds were swirling in different directions. This wasn't just a difficult shot, it was nearly impossible. Commander Morrison's voice crackled over the radio again. "Martinez, we're taking casualties down here. Johnson is hit and we're running low on ammunition. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now." Sarah felt the familiar calm settle over her. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. Every rabbit she had shot with her grandfather, every target she had hit in competition, every enemy fighter she had eliminated since arriving in Afghanistan, it had all been leading to this. She centered her crosshairs on Colonel Hassan Mahmoud, who was still scanning the hills with his binoculars. He was the closest target and would be the easiest shot. If she could eliminate him first, it might cause enough confusion to give the SEAL team a chance to advance or withdraw. Sarah controlled her breathing, just as she had been taught. In through the nose, hold for 3 seconds, out through the mouth. Her heart rate slowed. The trembling in her hands disappeared. The world became perfectly still. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second, beginning its journey across the valley. For 1.8 seconds, it flew through the air, fighting against gravity, wind, and atmospheric pressure. Sarah watched through her scope, tracking its path by the impact point. The bullet struck Colonel Mahmoud exactly where she had aimed, center mass in the chest. He dropped instantly, his binoculars clattering to the roof beside him. The other 2 generals looked around in confusion. They couldn't hear the gunshot over the noise of the firefight, and in the poor lighting, they couldn't immediately tell where the threat was coming from. General Rashid knelt beside the fallen colonel, trying to determine what had happened. Sarah was already working the bolt on her rifle, chambering a second round. She had to move fast before the remaining targets realized they were being engaged by a sniper and took cover. General Rashid was now crouched over Colonel Mahmoud's body, making himself a smaller target, but also remaining relatively stationary. Sarah adjusted her aim point slightly to account for his new position and the changing wind conditions. The second shot was even more challenging than the first. The wind had shifted more to the east, and Rashid was partially concealed behind a low wall. Sarah could only see his head and shoulders, giving her a target area of maybe 18 inches. She controlled her breathing again, made her final adjustments, and fired. The bullet flew true, striking General Rashid in the head and dropping him beside Colonel Mahmoud. 2 down, 1 to go. General Omar Farouk had finally realized what was happening. He was looking frantically in all directions, trying to spot the sniper position while shouting orders to his men. He started moving toward the stairway that led down from the roof, knowing that he needed to get to cover immediately. This would be Sarah's most difficult shot yet. Farouk was moving quickly. The wind was still gusting unpredictably, and she only had seconds before he disappeared from view. If she missed this shot, the most dangerous of the 3 commanders would escape, and the mission would be only partially successful. Sarah tracked the general's movement through her scope, leading him slightly to account for his speed. She had to time her shot perfectly. Fire too early and he wouldn't be in the right position. Fire too late and he would be behind cover. She controlled her breathing one more time, found her natural point of aim, and squeezed the trigger just as Farouk reached the top of the stairway. The bullet caught him mid-stride, spinning him around and sending him tumbling down the concrete steps. All 3 enemy generals were down. The effect on the compound's defenders was immediate and dramatic. Without their leaders coordinating the defense, the fighters began to panic. Some abandoned their positions and fled into the surrounding mountains. Others continued firing, but without any coordination or tactical plan. Commander Morrison's voice came over the radio, filled with amazement and relief. "Martinez, I don't know how you did that, but all 3 targets are down. We're advancing on the compound now." Sarah remained in position, providing overwatch as the SEAL team completed their assault. Within 30 minutes, they had secured the compound and captured several important enemy documents and communication equipment. The mission was a complete success. As the sun rose over the mountains, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. She had just accomplished something that most snipers would consider impossible: 3 consecutive kills at extreme range under the worst possible conditions. Corporal Johnson, who had been spotting for her throughout the engagement, shook his head in disbelief. "Martinez, I've been spotting for snipers for 8 years and I've never seen anything like that. 3 shots, 3 kills at nearly 1,900 meters in terrible conditions. That's not just good shooting, that's legendary." Sarah was still staring through her scope at the compound below, making sure there were no remaining threats to the SEAL team. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the full weight of what she had just accomplished was beginning to sink in. "I can't believe I actually made those shots," she whispered, more to herself than to Johnson. "Believe it," Johnson replied. "Every sniper in the military is going to hear about this. You just did something that people are going to talk about for the next 50 years. The extraction went smoothly. Helicopters arrived at the pickup zone right on schedule, and the entire team was back at Forward Operating Base Chapman by noon. As soon as they landed, word of Sarah's incredible shooting began to spread throughout the base. Commander Morrison found Sarah in the debriefing room later that afternoon. He had just finished writing his after-action report, and the look on his face was one of genuine amazement. "Martinez," he said, "I need to apologize to you." Sarah looked up, confused. "Sir?" "When I said no way anyone could land that shot, I meant it. In my 15 years of special operations, I've worked with some of the best snipers in the world. I honestly didn't think it was possible to make 3 consecutive kills at that range under those conditions. I was wrong, and my team owes you their lives." Morrison sat down across from her. "I've already put you in for a Silver Star. What you did today saved my entire team and eliminated 3 of the most dangerous enemy commanders in this theater. That's the kind of shooting that changes the course of battles." News of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through military channels. Within 48 hours, she received congratulatory messages from snipers and special operations units around the world. Marine Corps headquarters requested a detailed technical report of the engagement for training purposes. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the mission, Sarah received a secure video call from someone she had never met, but whose reputation was legendary throughout the military. "Marine Martinez," the voice said through the encrypted connection. "This is General Matthews, commander of Special Operations Command. I wanted to personally congratulate you on your performance during Operation Mountain Eagle." Sarah snapped to attention, even though she was just sitting in front of a computer screen. General Matthews was one of the most respected officers in the entire military, and she had never expected to speak with anyone of his rank. "Thank you." "Sir," she managed to say. "Martinez, I've been briefed on your shots during that mission. The technical analysis shows that what you accomplished should have been statistically impossible. The combination of range, wind conditions, and lighting created a scenario that our best computer model said had less than a 5% chance of success." The general paused, then continued. "You didn't just get lucky 3 times. You demonstrated a level of skill and composure under pressure that we rarely see, even among our most elite units. I want you to know that your actions have been noted at the highest levels of command." After the call ended, Sarah sat quietly in her room, trying to process everything that had happened over the past few days. She thought about her grandfather Joe, and how proud he would be when she was finally able to tell him the whole story. She thought about her instructors at sniper school, and how their training had prepared her for this moment. Most of all, she thought about the SEAL team members whose lives she had saved. Commander Morrison had told her that Petty Officer Johnson would make a full recovery from his wounds, and that the entire team was grateful for her actions. That night, Sarah called her grandfather on the satellite phone. Due to operational security, she couldn't give him details about the mission, but she could tell him that she had done something important. "Grandpa," she said, "I wanted you to know that everything you taught me about shooting, about staying calm under pressure, about doing the right thing even when it's difficult, it all mattered. It really mattered." Joe's voice was warm and proud. "I never doubted it would, kiddo. I could see something special in you from the first day we went hunting together. Whatever you did over there, I know you made the right choices." As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on how far she had come from that small ranch in Texas. The shy girl who had learned to shoot tin cans with her grandfather. His old rifle had become one of the most skilled snipers in military history. But she also knew that this was just one chapter in her story. There would be more missions, more challenges, and more opportunities to serve her country and protect her fellow service members. The shot that had made her famous was important, but it was what she did next that would truly define her legacy. 2 years after the legendary shot that eliminated 3 enemy generals, Sarah Martinez found herself in a very different environment. She was standing in the Pentagon, wearing her dress blue uniform with a chest full of ribbons, including the Silver Star she had earned for her actions during Operation Mountain Eagle. The ceremony was being held in honor of the anniversary of that historic mission. Sarah had been invited to speak to a gathering of military leadership, including generals, admirals, and senior special operations commanders from all branches of the service. As she looked out at the audience, Sarah could see Commander Morrison sitting in the front row. He had been promoted to captain and was now leading a larger special operations unit. Next to him sat Corporal Johnson, who had fully recovered from his wounds and had since been promoted to sergeant. In the back of the room, Sarah spotted her grandfather Joe, who had been flown in from Texas as an honored guest. At 78 years old, he looked exactly the same as he had when she was a little girl learning to shoot on the family ranch. His weathered hands and kind eyes hadn't changed a bit. "Ladies and gentlemen," the ceremony moderator announced, "please welcome Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Martinez, whose actions during Operation Mountain Eagle demonstrated the highest levels of courage, skill, and dedication to duty." As Sarah approached the podium, she thought about how much her life had changed since that early morning on the mountainside in Afghanistan. The military had promoted her twice, and she had become one of the most sought-after instructors at sniper school. Young Marines came from around the world to learn from the woman who had made the impossible shot. But success had also brought challenges she hadn't expected. The media attention had been overwhelming at times. Military historians wanted to interview her constantly. Documentary filmmakers had approached her about telling her story on television. Through it all, Sarah had remained focused on her core mission, training the next generation of Marine snipers and serving her country to the best of her ability. "When I was a little girl in Texas," Sarah began her speech, "my grandfather taught me that shooting wasn't just about hitting targets. He taught me that every shot carries responsibility. You have to be worthy of the power you hold in your hands." She paused, looking out at the audience of military leaders. "On that morning in Afghanistan, I wasn't thinking about making history or becoming famous. I was thinking about the American soldiers who were counting on me to do my job. Everything else, the impossible distance, the terrible conditions, the pressure, all of that became secondary to the simple fact that good people needed help." Sarah went on to describe the technical aspects of the shot, explaining how years of training and preparation had culminated in those crucial moments. She talked about the importance of mental preparation, physical conditioning, and the support of teammates like Corporal Johnson. "But most importantly," she said, "I want to talk about the human cost of what we do. Those 3 enemy commanders I eliminated that day were responsible for the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. By stopping them, we prevented countless future attacks and saved lives we'll never know about." After her formal remarks, Sarah was approached by dozens of military personnel who wanted to shake her hand and thank her for her service. Young female Marines in particular seemed inspired by her story. Many told her that her example had encouraged them to pursue careers in combat roles that had traditionally been dominated by men. One young lance corporal approached her with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm going to sniper school next month. I've been training for 2 years, but I was starting to doubt whether I was good enough. Hearing your story reminds me that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it." Sarah smiled and shook the young Marine's hand. "What's your name, Marine?" "Lance Corporal Rodriguez, ma'am." "Well, Rodriguez, let me tell you something my grandfather told me when I was about your age. Skill is important, but heart is everything. If you have the heart of a warrior and you're willing to put in the work, you can accomplish things that seem impossible." Later that evening, Sarah had dinner with her grandfather at a quiet restaurant near the Pentagon. It was the first time they had been alone together since she had returned from Afghanistan, and there was so much she wanted to tell him. "Grandpa," she said, "I never properly thanked you for everything you taught me. Not just about shooting, but about responsibility, about doing the right thing even when it's hard." Joe reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, you don't need to thank me for anything. Watching you grow into the woman you've become has been the greatest privilege of my life. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you." They talked late into the night about everything that had happened since Sarah had joined the military. Joe shared stories about his own experiences in Vietnam, and how proud he was that his granddaughter had carried on the family tradition of military service. "You know," Joe said as they prepared to leave the restaurant, "when you were little and I was teaching you to shoot, I always hoped you would use that gift for something important, but I never imagined you would accomplish something like this. 3 months later, Sarah received orders that would take her career in a completely new direction. She was being assigned to the Marine Corps Training and Education Command, where she would help develop new sniper training programs and tactics. Her legendary shot had not only saved the SEAL team and eliminated 3 dangerous enemy commanders, it had also provided valuable lessons that could be used to train future generations of military snipers. Sarah's new role involved traveling to bases around the world, teaching advanced marksmanship techniques and sharing the lessons she had learned in combat. She worked with military units from allied countries, helping to improve their sniper capabilities and strengthen international cooperation. But perhaps her most important work was with young American service members who were just beginning their own journeys in special operations. Sarah made sure that every sniper she trained understood not just the technical aspects of long-range shooting, but also the moral responsibility that came with the job. "You're not just learning to hit targets," she would tell her students. "You're learning to protect the innocent and eliminate threats to freedom and democracy. Never forget that every shot you take has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate target." Years later, when military historians wrote about the war in Afghanistan, they would describe many famous battles and heroic actions, but few single moments would be remembered as clearly as the morning when a young Marine from Texas made 3 impossible shots and changed the course of a battle. Sarah Martinez had proven that with enough skill, determination, and heart, even the impossible could become reality. Her story became an inspiration not just to military snipers, but to anyone who faced seemingly insurmountable challenges. The SEAL commander had been wrong when he said no one could land that shot. Sarah Martinez could, and she did. 3 times in a row when it mattered most. She had proven that heroes aren't born. They're forged through years of preparation, dedication, and the willingness to act when others are counting on them. From a small ranch in Texas to the mountains of Afghanistan to the halls of the Pentagon, Sarah's journey had shown that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they were properly prepared and motivated by something greater than themselves. The girl who had learned to shoot tin cans with her grandfather had become a legend, but more importantly, she had become exactly what her country needed her to be.